Welcome to Raiders on the Record, the podcast featuring Hastings High School athletics. I'm Athletic Director Trent Hansen. My colleague Tim Hanneberg and I work together to bring you the stories of Raider sports. We are thrilled to share conversations with the athletes, coaches, and alumni that represent Raider Nation. Check back weekly and be sure to share this podcast with your friends in the Raiders Network.
Aaron Fox is a 1994 Raider graduate. After graduating high school, Aaron played 2 seasons for the junior hockey team, the Green Bay Gamblers, where they won the junior division during his second season. He then went on to play at MSU-Mankato, where he is still the all-time leading scorer in the program history. Aaron has also helped the team transition to the D1 level. He was also inducted into the MSU Hall of Fame in 2021. After college, Aaron began a professional hockey career where he played more than 15 seasons throughout Europe. Some of the countries he played in include Slovakia, Switzerland, Germany, Slovenia, Austria, and Croatia. Towards the end of his playing career, Aaron transitioned to the other side of the puck and began as a GM in the KHL, Russia's Pro League. Currently, Aaron is a head coach and GM for the Sheffield Steelers in Sheffield, London. All right, here we are with Aaron Fox. Aaron, to start off the podcast here, tell us, give us that snapshot view of what your life looked like growing up. Did you always live in Hastings? Did you guys move to Hastings originally? Are your parents from Hastings? Brothers, sisters, mom, dad? Give us all the good stuff about you growing up.
Yeah, lived in Hastings my whole life there. Parents were divorced when I was 3. I'm an only child. It was really nice because parents got along real well. They lived about a block from each other. So growing up, I kind of had free reign wherever I wanted to stay, I could stay. There was no 1 week on, 1 week off. If I wanted, like what we were having for dinner at dad's house, I'd go to my dad's house and stay. If I liked what my mom was cooking, or it was a great childhood. I really can't complain at all. And then spent my entire childhood there, and that's about it.
Perfect. We do like hearing about the schools that people attended to. And if you want to give any shout outs to different teachers, they still might be around. So talk about some of your favorite teachers you had in the schools that you attended.
Yeah, I went to Tilden Elementary, and then the Hastings Middle School, and then obviously the old senior high there. I'm a little too old to experience the new high school there. Favorite teachers, man, that's a tough one. I wasn't the greatest student, if you would say, growing up, but Tommy Johnson was awesome. I remember my kindergarten teacher, Miss Wintermeyer, who was at Tilden there with me. But other than that, it was, I'm old. We're going back a long time here to go all the way back there. Yeah.
That's all right. So this is mainly a sports podcast. So we do focus around sports a lot.
Yeah.
So what do you think one of your best or one of your earliest sports memories was growing up?
Well, I think, I was a typical, played all sports growing up. I played soccer, call it American football, because over here, I live in Europe currently. So football over here is soccer. Basketball, I remember Trent backing me down all the time. Playing rec basketball growing up. I was a competitive guy. I was a late bloomer too. I was small in high school and never really grew till I was 19, which is kind of, I know when we'll get into this a little bit more, I think is a unique kind of story of my career trajectory there. But I played all sports. A youth memory, I can't say I have one in particular that I can remember growing up as a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old. In a Pee Wee tournament. It's called the Silver Sticks. It was pretty our Hastings A Pee Wee team played in it. I think there's 64 teams, but only 4 from Minnesota, and that was a unique tournament that we got to play in at that age. And then I went on lots of hockey camps to Michigan and out east. But yeah, I don't think I have a single memory that really sticks out from my elementary, middle school age, if you will.
No worries. we've had a lot of people on here, a lot of alumni. Their first job was detasseling corn. So I don't know if that was your first job, but walk us through what your first job was growing up. If it was baling hay or detasseling corn, that'd be pretty sweet to add another one to our list.
I think a day of detasseling corn was all I could manage, to be fair. It's funny, I've been pretty fortunate. I did some bartending through college, but I don't think I've ever had a real job to this day. And I think that really, that's kind of how I view my life currently is, I coach hockey for a living right now. I played hockey for a living for 15 years and went to school on hockey scholarship. So it's one of those, for me, I'm passionate about what I do. And to me, I'm still waiting on that first real job.
Maybe one day you'll get there. That's awesome.
Can you elaborate a little bit? I mean, you got to look, that's in a cool way, a little bit of philosophical answer, but if you blend that with what growing up was like, right? Whether it be 7 or 8 years old or 14 or 15 years old, can you tell us a little bit more about just that pathway, as it were? I mean, what was maybe contrast what it was like growing up to, maybe what kids now experience, like your choices in the organized stuff versus the unorganized stuff. And how did you kind of find your way from soccer to hockey and different things as you went through? Just more to tell us a little more about what it was like.
Yeah, I think that's for my stories pretty unique to a lot of kids growing up is I was a real late bloomer. I made every year I tried out for a sport. I made the B team the first year. So I was a B team, a B squirt my first year squirt, then an A squirt my second year, a B peewee my first year peewee. I played my sophomore year of high school. I didn't play a single game of varsity hockey. JV my sophomore year, and then I kind of hit a little growth spurt when I was 17 there. Had a great junior year, had a really, really good senior year. And then in hockey, it's a little bit different. You go play junior A hockey if you're not quite ready to go the Division I hockey route. So I was drafted by the Green Bay Gamblers, went there, played 2 years there, won a national championship, won the league, won the playoff. And then, from there, I got a Division I scholarship to play hockey down at Mankato. Like you mentioned earlier, I was just inducted to the Hall of Fame, all-time leading Division I scorer down there currently. And then I played 15 years of pro hockey, and right from there took a job as a general manager in the KHL, which is the Russian league, which is probably the second best league in the world under the NHL. Spent 300 days in Russia in 4 years, which was some pretty crazy and wild things that I saw and went through. And now I transitioned that into the coaching side of it, and now I'm here in the UK as a head coach, general manager. So I think I guess the perspective of where you're going with this is, I don't think I get to where I am if I'm an A player those years, because I would have just chased the puck, or you know what I mean? I had the opportunity to be the best player on my team as a B squirt, as a B peewee, have the puck in my hands, make plays, you know what I mean? Dominate games, instead of being that 10th or 11th forward who, got my ice cut early and was chasing pucks, and, and it didn't have a chance to develop the skill side of the game. So I just think that it's really unique that, I've talked to plenty of parents who've called me from home, the Brian Selesky's, the Ben Piney's, the guys that I grew up with, talking sports at that level. And I've kind of always just said, man, make sure it's fun for the kid, make sure that he's in a position to develop as well. It's hard. I remember it being hard. I remember all my friends making the A team, you know what I mean? And that first year, and me being with the older kids that maybe weren't as good, but then the next year it was I'd always go up there and then outplay the same guys that made the team over me. And then we'd move up a level, and those same kids, because they were bigger and stronger and skated a little better, would still make the A team the Bantam year. And I would be down as a B Bantam. And you know what I mean? It was a kind of weird trajectory there. I think if you looked at the class of kids that I grew up with, and I would have been the only one that went on to play pro hockey and make a career out of this, I think I would have been laughed at 10, 12 years old,
So tell us a little more about your mentality then, if you can tap back into your 10 or 12 or 14-year-old self, in terms of, there's so much of trying to prepare the path for the kid instead of the kid for the
Yeah.
path these days, you know?
Yeah.
And so what was your own mentality, or maybe how did your parents process all of that? Because there certainly is always that natural desire to want to be on or be the best, right? So
Yeah.
how did you process it at the time? And then the second part of that is speak a little bit to your own processing then. So knowing where you fit, right? How did you approach, like, for example, you know, Tim wouldn't know this, but like growing up in the same era and having that cool, consistent group of friends over a few years, you also were a guy that when it came to pick up basketball or skating behind the rink or playing cards, doesn't matter. Everybody wanted you on their team too. All right. You had a shrewd approach,
sure.
and there's that aspect. You don't have to be the tallest, fastest, strongest to be the best. Elaborate a little bit on your mentality at that time.
Well, I know you sent me the list of questions there a little bit earlier, and like what defines me, or what 3 words, you know, and the biggest one is just competitive. Like, man, I don't like to lose. I got a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old, and you know what I mean? We'll play games, and I'm pretty competitive with them. So, and you know, like I'm a head coach now. As a player, that's the biggest thing. Like, I just, if you're willing to compete, if you're willing to and have fun with it, like that's the biggest thing. Like, I just love sports. I loved every sport. You know, like you said, we'd go play 2-on-2 beach volleyball tournament out at the Weiss house. You know what I mean? And for me, I was always slow. Like, that was my MO. Like, my nickname was Speedo because I was so slow that, you know what I mean? That it was like it was a make fun of me nickname. You know, and I didn't really know where it would take me, Trent, to be perfectly honest with you. My process at 10 to 12, like I remember always being disappointed when cuts came, and my name was never on that A-team list. But I guess I'm pretty fortunate to have, you know, the parents that I had, that they like you said, I'd go 4 o'clock, I'd be out behind the rink until 8 o'clock at night after school during the winter, skating, and they gave me every opportunity. They put me on the skating treadmill at Acceleration, Minnesota, to work on my foot speed. They would, you know, my mom would be up there at 9 o'clock at night with the lights on the truck so that I could work on that. You know what I mean? I think times have changed a little bit with the drive kids have, a little bit at that age, the way we had it. You know what I mean? Like, I remember playing basketball with you guys. You know what I mean? And like you said, I wasn't a great basketball player, but I could compete, and I understood the game, and I could, you know, keep up, if you will. You know, you guys still play that 7 a.m. basketball game before school every day?
It's still going.
Yeah.
The people on this Zoom call have retired from the league, but it's still going.
No, really? You guys hung it up?
Yeah, you know, you got to take care of your knees when you click a couple years off the tires, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I don't know what my process was back then. I just knew that I loved hockey. You know, like I said, I played multiple sports growing up, and then I gave up American football as a 9th grader. I played baseball till 10th grade, and then I did play soccer my 11th and 12th grade years, just for the conditioning aspect of it. And hockey was more of a 3-season sport for me. For that, you know, you played your high school season, the spring season, and then the summer season too. But I didn't really know how good I was until, you know, I was 17 years old. You know, like literally that junior year, I think I finished. I didn't play a game at varsity my sophomore year, and I finished 5th in the conference in scoring my junior year, and then led the conference in scoring my senior year, and then went and, you know, like led my team in junior, led the playoffs in scoring. So it was weird. It was a really weird dynamic how I kind of grew. I probably grew from being 5'8" as a 16-year-old to 6 foot as a 19-year-old, and I just kind of kept my body kept caught up to my mind, if you will. Like, I felt like that was the biggest thing too. I was always slow, so I had to be smarter than everybody in everything I did on the ice. You know what I mean? I had to figure out how I needed to get to a spot when I couldn't get there, you know, as fast as someone else. So I think that kind of what set me apart was just my hockey mind.
Any other intangibles then too? You talked about a big growth spurt, talked about a ton of time on the ice with your parents. Anything else that kind of helped you make that big jump from that sophomore to that junior year, and then junior to the senior year as well?
Man, I don't know. I feel like just sticking with it. I think that's like, I still had fun. It didn't matter. You know what I mean? It didn't matter if I was on a B team or A team. You still have to enjoy what you're doing. You still have to want to work and put the work in. From an intangible, man, I don't know. Again, it was just love of the game for me. It was just a real big love of the game, and being willing to put the additional time in that maybe others didn't need to at that age because they were just more physically gifted.
Gotcha.
One thing I'd lob in, Timo, whether we keep it or cut it, that I think is fun to share is this is my own selfish perspective growing up with Aaron, is that kind of as I hinted at before, whether we were playing home run derby or pickup basketball or 3-on-3 hockey, or it doesn't matter, cards, PlayStation, wasn't even PlayStation, it was Nintendo at the time. Yeah. But the point is, you wanted Speedo on your team because he said it in his own way, but there was as you look back on it, there was a cerebral and a competitive element to his play where, yeah, everyone knew he wasn't the fastest dude out there and was, a smaller guy and whatever, but kind of that proverbial always in the right place, right? Yeah. Always making a play when it counted. Someone you knew was always going to battle. I mean, it was kind of like
lucky. It was luck back then.
Yeah, right.
It was always luck, though. You know what I mean? Like I was always so lucky to always be in the right place. That was something that I look back on. You know what I mean? Like it was continuous. Like I'd win in basketball against basketball play. Oh, you were just lucky. You know what I mean? I would.
Yeah.
Me and Seth would take down Viether and Ben Weiss in 2-on-2 volleyball. Over and over and over again. Or me and Josh Weiss.
Yep.
And it was, we got lucky. That was just kind of the thing back.
But the reason I love sharing that then is as as you moved on, right, into juniors and Mankato and beyond, and as lives take different paths, you kind of lose touch a little bit. When I would converse with other people who would talk a little bit about watching you, and someone who was a friend of yours but not a hockey guy, right? That wasn't my sport.
Yeah.
They would use all the descriptors of the arc of your hockey career that's the 13, 14, 17-year-old dude that I know, right? Yeah, they would talk about your hands. They would talk about you being in the right place. They would talk about making plays at big moments. They would talk, I'm like, yeah. And to your point, it was cool to hear that because you talked about your body catching up with your mind, or kind of the way that, the development took place. I just remember kind of taking a little bit of like friendly pride in it. Like, yeah, that's the dude that everybody knows. It's cool that he gets to do it on a different stage because now his body is caught up to him. I don't know. It was just fun to see it happen at that kind of stage.
I appreciate that.
That's the way it went at the park. You know what I'm saying? It was cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So looking back to rewinding back to high school here, what do you think one of your favorite moments was of high school? Trent asked me to point out this rivalry you had with South St. Paul, I believe. Is that right? Or was it South St. Paul, Trent?
Yeah, I think we had a 9-7 win at home against South St. Paul, and that was a huge rivalry. They had a player on their team by the name of Jason Siles, and I don't remember many players' names from high school. You know what I mean? There's very few that you remember, but he was a top player in the state. And growing up in Pee Wees, he dominated us in Pee Wee, dominated us in Bantam hockey. He was just that much better than us. He got a scholarship to go play at the University of Minnesota. And by the time I got to Mankato and we played Minnesota the first year, he had already washed out. You know what I mean? And I had a 50-point WCHA year. It's kind of retrospective. I think I had 3-3 that night at the 9-7 win. He'd go down and tie it up, and I'd go down and we'd go up one, and he'd come back. So it was. I think the boys. I know Trent was at that. He's not a hockey guy, but he was at that one. That's for sure.
I was there. I might still have one of the pucks. You never know.
Yeah, I would throw pucks in the stands of the boys.
Between you and Ryan Mulner, I had a stack.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So then I guess transitioning from high school, so then you said you played juniors in Green Bay, and then you went to Mankato as well, and you were on, make sure I get this right. So you were the first year that Mankato was Division I. Is that correct? For hockey?
Correct.
Okay. So talk to
Yeah.
us about what that was like, going through that process. If you knew Mankato was going to be D1 kind of when you were getting there, or you knew it was in the works. Talk to us what that was like, kind of coming to a brand new Division I team. And I know you said in the Hall of Fame video, you guys started off at the bottom of the WCHA, and then by the time you're done, you kind of worked your way to the middle, and then kind of now Mankato's towards the top of the conference. So talk to
It's
us what that was
crazy. Yeah.
like, kind of starting off that brand new program and getting to the big boys, and then kind of what it was like, and any cool stories from there too.
Yeah, for sure. So my second year of junior, it's kind of funny because the Green Bay story kind of transitions into the Mankato story. So the Green Bay Gamblers are now probably the best organization in the USHL as well. And my first year there, they were an expansion team. So year one, and it also will transition in my favorite coach or best coach, who's Don Granato, who was my coach in Green Bay for 2 years, who's now the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres in the NHL. So he recruited basically a team of all rookies. So you can play junior for 2 years back then, and every other team had probably 10, 12 veterans and 8 first-year USHL players. So he went the route of all first-year guys, and we went like 10-45 our first year, got absolutely dummied all season long. Second year, he kept most of the core back, added a few new first-year guys, and we won the league regular season. We won the playoffs, and maybe the best personal achievement I had was it was a game 7, and I had a 5-goal game 7 in the championship round in a 7-5 win, and had 5 in game 7 to win the league playoffs, and then we won the national championship. So we won all 3. We won all 3 of my second year junior after getting absolutely pumped our first year. And I went on a couple visits to some schools, and I knew Mankato had already been accepted into the D1 in the 1996 year. They were scheduled to play 2 years of independent, schedule already set up with the UMDs, North Dakotas. It was a D1 schedule with hopefully being accepted into the WCHA by year 3. And we actually ended up playing 3 years of an independent schedule and got accepted into the WCHA my senior year. So I only got to play 1 year of WCHA hockey. We ended up finishing 4th place ahead of the Gophers that year. They finished in 5th. And I was all WCHA that year as well. So it was just kind of a same thing, starting at the bottom there, took some bumps and bruises on the way. I love Mankato. I mean, you were down there, so it's a special place. Coaches took great care of us. It was a little bit different. I'm not sure how it was that we were the only Division I sport on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my best buddies were wrestlers. Johnny Alexander. I'm not sure if you know any of the guys from that era. But we kind of hung with the wrestlers, and then, yeah, I loved my time there. So I spent 4 years there. And then, after my last game, we lost in the final 5, got eliminated. And I went, and right after that, I signed in the IHL to go play the rest of the year, in the IHL.
Nice. So then, obviously, we've already kind of alluded to it. You've played all throughout Europe. Walk us through that kind of process, how you got over there. Talk to us, maybe you mentioned the Russia deal too, and kind of walk us through all the teams and what that was like, kind of going from maybe similarities between the United States and Europe, maybe just
Yep.
living and hockey as well. Was it kind of completely different on the ice? Was there some things that were completely the same, or same, different, differences
Sure.
in living in the United States versus Europe? Favorite country you visited, all the kind of good stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big chunk here. But yeah, we'll we'll get after it for sure. So I actually signed. I actually went to training camp with the St. Louis Blues the year after I left Mankato. Had a pretty good main camp, and they sent me to their American Hockey League team, and then got sent down to their East Coast Hockey League team. And at Christmas time, I just wasn't happy with the situation. I was running some pretty good numbers, and just the coach wouldn't play me. So I decided to reach out to my agent me if anything overseas. One thing I will say about my game is I wasn't the most physical player. I was more of an offensive guy. I had no issue getting dirty, when I needed to, but it wasn't my prime part of my game. And the European game kind of suits my style a little bit more. It's not as physical. Some at the East Coast League level back then, like the coach would just tap me on the shoulder and he'd say, "Go fight 15," and I'd be like, what's going on here? Like it just wasn't me and my game. So my agent found me a deal in Slovakia, which circa 2001. What an experience that was. Like, honestly, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I spent 3 weeks there. I was a typical American coming overseas, absolutely clueless to the culture of the real world. And ended up finishing the year in Switzerland, which was unbelievable. To be fair, I was right on the Italian border, Swiss-Italian border, beautiful country. After my season was over, I traveled down to Rome and did the whole Italy and finished in Amsterdam before coming home. And then, which was really nice, was I really went to Europe, and my European career started the next year, where I went to Garmisch, Germany, and played a full season there in Germany. And I went over there with a buddy I went to college with, TJ Gudarelli, and two buddies that played at Wisconsin, Matt Murray and Dan Bjornley. And so we went over there kind of together. We were the only imports on the team. It's a little ski resort town. We'd ski on Mondays. It was like four best buddies in Europe having a good time, living the life. We finished in second place that year. The team was owned by a German who was married to a old Playboy playmate from back in the day. Like, picture with her and Schwarzenegger on the walls, her and Hugh Hefner on the walls, and we're like, what is going on right now? You know what I mean? So it was just wild. It was just a wild year, but had such a good time. And then that team went bankrupt the next year, so I ended up in Innsbruck, Austria. Also beautiful city. Had a really good year there as well, and then signed back in Germany the following year. And I spent a couple years in Germany, and then as a professional hockey player, like, literally you're a salesman. You know what I mean? You're working off 1 or 2 year contracts, and every year you have to produce, because there's an import rule. So you can only have so many players from outside of that country playing on the team, so that, like, in Germany there, you could have 5 players from outside of Germany. So there's a lot of competition for those 5 spots. So it's very competitive. I had some success. I ended up I won a championship in Germany. Then I went to Slovenia, lived in Bled, Slovenia. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of Bled, Slovenia. It's this little Slovenia. You might, though. It's this little Slovenian town that lives on a lake, and there's a island castle on this lake. So if you've ever seen, I'm sure you might have heard or seen pictures of it. Trent's a basketball guy, like Doncic and Dragic. Those guys are all Slovenians, and that's where they, like, Anze Kopitar. That's where they kind of all spend their enjoyment. Is so we lived on this little. My wife and I lived on this little lake town in Slovenia, which was unbelievable. Then we went back to Innsbruck for a couple years. Played in Vienna, Austria for 2 years. Unbelievable city. And then I spent 7 years in Zagreb, Croatia. And I played 1 year in Zagreb, and it was a new franchise. This is kind of the story how I got into the non-hockey side of things, or the non-playing side of things. So I played in Zagreb, and it was their first year playing in the Austrian league. And I lived right across the door I lived in our owner's apartment. I was like one of the key guys they signed to, like, build a brand off of. And they didn't really have an idea what they were doing. Like, they were really, like, shooting from the hip. So he'd spend hours and hours at my house, like, what do we do here? How are we supposed to do this? Because I'd been in Europe a long time. We need players. Like, I'd be making phone calls to find players. It was like, that was kind of wild. So I got to be really good friends with the owner, which is a unique relationship as a player. You know what I mean? And that dynamic is a little bit weird. So I only played 1 year there just because I went back to Austria for 2 years, and then this owner calls me. I had 1 more year in my contract in Innsbruck, Austria. This would have been in 2013, 12-13 season. I had 1 more year. He calls me and he says, we have an opportunity. We've done a deal with Gazprom, the huge Russian gas conglomerate, to buy gas in Croatia, and they're going to give us sponsorship to join the KHL, the Russian league. So they're going to give us money basically to play in their league. And he said, and I can't manage the sports side of this alone anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was hard for him already. And he was like, at that level, and I was like, well, what are you thinking? He was like, well, I'd like you to come be the general manager and run the sports side of it. I didn't have to deal with sponsorship or travel like that because I didn't know the language. He says, but I want you to recruit, interview the coaches, recruit the players, negotiate contracts. And I had, like I said, I had 1 more year in my deal, but I was 35 years old. And I was like, man, I probably got 3 more years in me, but I mean, what an unreal transition into a different side of the game, So I said, if you guys get in, I'm in. You know what I mean? So we discussed the terms of the deal, what it would be. Initially signed a 3-year agreement to come in and be the sports director was the official title. And I still didn't know, like, I went recruiting in March and April and had no idea if we were going to get in the KHL. My team in Innsbruck thought I was in America visiting. They had no idea I was planning on doing this if it went off. And I remember being in Chicago, just watched a Chicago Wolves game, American League game. And he called me that night when I was laying in bed and said, we're in. And so that next day I had to call the team and say, I called my coach and told him, and he was like, man, what an awesome, you know what I mean? Like, they were happy for me. There was no issue there. So basically we had 3 months to put a KHL hockey team together with 0 players. And I don't have any experience in this either. We had to hire a coach, hire a coaching staff. We hired 4 coaches and signed 20 players to go play in the second best league in the world with about 1/10 of the budget as these Russian teams. Like, there's guys in Russia that make 7 million, 8 million a year. And I'm paying guys in the 150 to 300,000 a year, range. But I'm using it as almost like eye candy. So we'd bring guys in for 150, 200,000. They'd play well, and then they'd go get $1 million contracts in the KHL. So that was kind of the stepping stone. And they knew that for us to be competitive, that was our model. You know what I mean? We weren't going to hold guys hostage. If you guys came in and played well and we could move you to make more money, and the club made some transfer fee money on it, that was kind of the dynamic that we built. But those trips were so we'd charter our own plane. We'd go spend 8 days. We'd play a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday in Russia, travel to Moscow, Sharapovets, Kazan, and then finish the trip in Omsk, and then travel 12 hours home. Like, there were times we'd have 8-hour time zone changes, a 10-hour flight, and then trying to figure out, we'd have the guys eating at 4 a.m. to stay on Zagreb time. Like, it was wild. It was really wild. And my director of hockey ops was a guy who was kind of my partner there. He dealt with, that side of things. But the craziest stuff was, like, we were a brand new team. So every new city we came to, like, the president of the team would want us to come in and have a meeting, to introduce themselves. And we walk into this old Russian room, and they'd have, like, pickled herring, a bottle of vodka, and they'd sit there and toast shots before the game and make you eat, like, this food that you can't even imagine eating. And literally, like, and they would just be like, not pass the shock, which means, like, last one, but they have, like, 4 of those last ones. And by the time the game started, we'd be sitting there, like, we couldn't even see the ice. You know what I mean? Like, so we realized real quickly that we to the early anymore. We started not accepting invites. We're like, no, we can't make it till 7. So we'd be able to skip that side of it. But man, it was pretty wild.
Oh, that is crazy. So you said kind of when you're on that 34 to 35 kind of age range that
Yep.
you maybe had about 3 years left to play. I guess what I'm wondering is what was your plans after that? Did you plan on going to the other side of hockey, or did this opportunity pop up and you just kind of took it and ran and found a good kind of opportunity to kind of transition after your playing career?
Yeah, that was it exactly. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after hockey. Like I had kicked, like I'm a networking type of guy, so I had kicked around like the agent side of it, because I had kind of been pretty good at finding players, finding jobs. I'd played a lot of different places, so I had a lot of good contacts, which ultimately helped me in my recruiting when it became time to take over that Zagreb job and start looking for players. So I'd kind of thought about going down that road before this opportunity came up. But when the opportunity came up, I kind of just knew, like, man, it's not like a low level thing either. Like it was a high level. It was, and then what happened is we spent 4 years in the KHL. The gas money ran out, more or less. The team then went back into the Austrian league, which was the league I went and played with them at. And I'd spent another 2 years there, where I then transitioned from. So I was a pretty active sports director. Like the coaches I hired were very good coaches. The communication, the relationships that we had were very, very positive. So I spent a lot of time in the coaches' room over that time. I saw how they operated as a coach. As a manager, like all I did was I recruited, I negotiated contracts, I found the players to give to the coach. And he was the one that was then able to make like the day-to-day difference. After the season starts, as a general manager, there's not much you can do anymore. You kind of hand it over, and then they make the day-to-day decisions, and which I really enjoy now. Like I think that's one thing when I transitioned into the coaching side, I really enjoy. It's the day-to-day grind of how you X's and O's, how can you make a difference, how we run like attention to detail, our pregame scouts, like we'll scout the other team we play, we'll break down everything they do, how we're gonna play against them there, and then focus on our own game. Obviously, like none of that matters if you don't have your own identity and how you're gonna play. But I think that was, so that was kind of the whole transition there. Is it started as just the management side, and then, again, into the coaching side. And that's the other side of it. It's kind of hard to get a job over here as a general manager if you're not from the country. They don't have a ton of general managers from North America that live in Germany or in Switzerland, but they have a ton of coaches who are North America, in the UK, Germany, Austria. So I think I just felt like that was the next best step for me, was to go the coaching route.
What about a language barrier? What was that like? I mean, you're in all these different countries, and then especially, I mean, playing maybe one thing, and then as a GM, another thing. You're trying to recruit these players and talk to these players, and you're going to Russia and this country and talking to people. What was that kind of like?
Yeah, it's difficult, for sure. I think, my wife is German. I met her playing in Germany. So she only speaks German to the kids. So I picked that language up off on a need basis for sure. For sure, if I wanted to understand what they were talking about, Daddy, behind my back about.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, when you hear those buzzwords pop up, then you probably know when to snap into it, huh?
Yeah, and I mean the Croatian and Russian side, we had everyone in Croatia speaks English or German. The younger generation speaks English. The older generation all speaks German. So I didn't really have a huge need to learn Croatian. I could understand some things when I needed to, Russia, the same. We always had a translator that came with us. And kind of funny, when we were in Russia, if anyone asked me where I was from, I'd always say I was Canadian. Just because of the world we live in, you know what I mean? It's a very safe place to say you're from. But yeah, so it's nice being in the UK now. I will say, just the language, there is no barrier here, which is nice. But I always found a way to get by. I had one place that year in Germany, it was pretty special because we had no idea language. Our coach didn't speak any English, none, like absolutely zero. Like he would give his pregame rah-rah speech in German, and the four of us would like all sat next to each other, not a clue, like zero clue. And then at the end of it, he would look at the four of us and he'd be like, he like hated it. He hated the imports. Like he hated Americans, Canadians. He just looks at us and be like, just win the game, just win. And that's all he'd say to us. And then we'd have to go like talk to the captain and be like, so what are we doing? Pretty funny.
Hey, Timo, I got two quick follow-ups.
For sure.
One, for fun, that you can. It's actually a serious question, but we could cut it. You ever get paid in bags of cash, or did you ever have to deliver the bags of cash and like strap that stuff to your legs like John Pohl and some of the other guys I hang out with had to do? That's one question. The second one is just talk a little bit about your own support network. You talked about your networking, just style, personality, and certainly you're leaning on all those different experiences as you transition into the kind of the sport leadership or even the coaching side. But if you don't mind, talk a little bit about kind of that mentor network of your own. Who are the people that kind of you leaned on, and what did they teach you as you went through that?
Yeah, I think that was the other side of it, was when you played for as many different coaches as I had. I took the positive that I liked. There's no perfect coach out there. Like I think that's the hardest thing for me in the coaching is going into that room and trying to motivate, with the speech, because I was never a huge rah-rah guy. You know what I mean? There isn't many coaches who could come in between periods and like get me going or say something that was really gonna make me, so that's the biggest thing I think as a coach that I potentially struggle with a little bit is going in there and coming up with a message that works. You know what I mean? And there's so many of them. You do one before the game, you do one after the first period, you do one after the second period, and you feel like you're just going in there trying to. I remember sitting in there as a player, like looking at my coach going, no, like, what are you talking about? So that side of it's a little bit hard. From the networking side, like I said, like I had a coach, Doug Bradley, he was my coach in 4 different places. When I took the head job in Zagreb, he came on as my assistant. He was a huge piece for me. He had worked in Pittsburgh's organization. He had some really strong connections. There's a guy, the guy I hired in the KHL level, his name is Gordy Dwyer. He's done some stuff for Team Canada, coached in the KHL after Zagreb as well. Like he now is a huge network support for me. When if our penalty kill's struggling and we're, if we're getting up and overed and then back to the top, I'll call him and be like, hey, this is what's happening. How do I, what would you do here? So there's that side of it. To be honest, the general manager side, I was literally shooting from the hip, Trent. Like it was absolute chaos. Trying to.
Sounds like Tim's fantasy football team, right? You're just winging it. You're looking online. You're kind of.
My team name is shooting for the hip. How'd you know that?
But you picked it up quite quickly. You know what I mean? You realize which agents were playing the game, which agents you could trust. You know what I mean? That was the one thing I found. You find some good relationships that they're going to always send you character guys that are in it for the right reasons, and they're not in it to just make a quick buck. And continually use those guys. And now, I built some really good relationships through the KHL time. So now in my job here, I do both. I do the coaching and the recruiting and general manager side. So I've been able to go back to some of those guys. It's not at the same price point, but again, there's a business relationship there. And have found a pretty good niche that way for sure.
Tim, I would just, I would just say too, we can cover that one on the phone. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. But Tim, I think it's cool to highlight, because we know what our audience is like for a lot of these, and I think what I hear Aaron talking about is just the social capital that you develop over time with all the different experiences that you have. But I know that everyone that's ever met or spent time with Aaron would describe him just as a genuine, authentic guy. And it's, I don't think it's any accident, Aaron, that over the course of all that transition, that you're able to leverage either the experiences, the influences, the people. When I say leverage, I mean that from how can I continue to develop and how can I make this thing, whatever I'm doing, GM, the coach, the best it can be. That's something that any listener to this can take away, right? Whether it's a 15-year-old kid or a parent or any one of those coaches, that social capital piece from just being an authentic person and taking something out of every experience you have it's really cool to hear you describe it. It's fun.
No, I appreciate that.
So Aaron, we talked about it earlier. You recently got inducted into the MSU-Mankato Hall of Fame. So tell us what that call was like. Was it kind of unexpected? Did it take you by surprise? What was your feelings kind of when you got the call? And what does that honor kind of mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a special honor. It's, Don Bros, who was my coach, Mr. Hockey down there. He had reached out to me and had mentioned that my name had been brought up, and, he was gonna do the selling point from his side on why he felt I deserved that. It was definitely, I was disappointed I wasn't able to be. We had a game that the next night over here. I was a little disappointed I wasn't able to be there in attendance. That was a special place for my family. My grandparents spent every weekend down there, my aunts and uncles. So, that place holds a special place for me for sure. And it really, drove my career as well. Like, they pushed me athletically and forced you into the gym, and that's where it really became professional to me, the sport. So I was overwhelmed, to be fair. Like, it was something I had hoped for one day. I feel like the numbers I ran down there are pretty good, and to still be 20 years later, still be the leading Division I scorer down there is pretty cool.
For sure. So that we went over it a couple different times, your occupation now and your family. If anything else you want to add to that too, what you're doing and where you're living, your family, anything about that, if you want to add anything, you could go for it.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm in Sheffield, England, where we're currently in first place in the league right now after 13 games. I think we played 13 games. Great spot. My wife, 2 kids 13 and 8. They love it here. We're right in the Peak District, so 5 minutes from our house. We're out in beautiful UK countryside. Great organization, very, very professional. We average close to 8,000 fans a game. So it's big business here. It's, it's a bit of a pressure cooker. We're probably the biggest club in the country, so we're expected to win on a yearly basis. I took over the team in 1920. In 18-19, the team finished in 7th place, didn't make the Challenge Cup. 1920, we won the Challenge Cup, and we're a point out of first with 7 games left before COVID struck and shut the league down. Stayed here through lockdown. Like I said, organization management has taken great care of me and my family. Right now we consider this home, with school going until July and then my season starting end of August. You don't really get an opportunity to come home and travel very much with the schedule overlap. It was nice as a player. We'd be done in April. I bought a house up in Brainerd on the lake, so we'd come spend 4 months in the off season up at the lake house and loved that life as well. But once the kids get a little bit older and school goes till June, July over here, and my year is now a 12-month job, not just an 8-month job. It's kind of changed that dynamic of our life. But yeah, it's been really good.
So this is like, I'm kind of losing track, but all the teams you've been on, going from maybe the bottom to the top here. So you talked about maybe not so much our high school team here in Hastings, but you talked about playing in Green Bay, Mankato, the teams you played on in Europe, and now this one too. I guess that's where that luck comes in that Trent was talking about earlier. You being part of the lucky side of you, right? Or no? Is it? Do you think it's something?
Hold on, just real quick. Aaron called it luck. I didn't use that word.
All right. So what do you think about that? Do you think it is? I mean, you're just kind of grinding at it, and eventually good things come, or what would you kind of point at for all those teams kind of turning it around?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Like I said, like I'm a competitive guy, and that's, you know, I think that's what anyone in my job works for. You know, as a player, you play to win. As a coach, you coach to win. Like that's so I think, of course, there's always going to be, we're not very lucky right now because I got 6 guys out of my lineup. You know, we've hit the injury bug, torn ACL, torn MCL. So we're struggling that way right now. But I think it's always going to be a grind. But I really don't consider it that, because, like I said, I feel like I haven't worked a real day in my life. Like I sit in front of a computer and get to watch hockey, and, you know, play a game of chess with another coach on how we're going to dictate our game. And as a player, you know, like I said, I was the first guy at the rink every day. I was the last one to leave. I loved being on the ice after practice, messing around. I've loved my life. It's taken me, you know, I left Hastings in 1994 and haven't been back for more than a couple weeks at a time. You know what I mean? And have seen 50 countries and, you know, explored the world and made a great life of it. So that's how I kind of look at my life. Is I just I've enjoyed that hockey has given me this ride. You know, I don't have to sit in a bank and sell stocks or, you know, sell houses. It's just fun. What I get to do is fun, and I don't take it for granted. That's for sure.
For sure. Trent, anything for you to add in, or any questions for you before we kind of head into our final couple questions?
Nope, you got it from here, man.
All right. So Aaron, last 2 questions then for you. We've taken a ton of your time already. So looking back on all your experiences, high school, junior hockey, Division I hockey, professional hockey, if you had to give parents and coaches 2 pieces of advice, what do you think they would be and why?
Coaches? I'm giving coaches advice here.
Coaches and parents, and or your choice.
Yeah. Make it fun. Like I think that's something, you know, I have my tech pack that I put up in our room. Start of the year, we'll go through it, and it doesn't, the focal points might change, identity, character to every year, but one of them always stays the same, and that's have fun. Like I truly believe that the sport needs to be fun for the players. It needs to be, you know, we'll come in on a Wednesday and we'll play small area games. I won't bag skate the guys unless, you know, it's competitive. So we'll play a small area mini game to 3, and loser has to skate, instead of just putting guys on the line and, you know, blowing the whistle for down back, stuff like that. It's just make the game fun. And I think nowadays coaching too, especially nowadays, communicate, be honest. You know what I mean? That is the key to coaching nowadays, is communicate with your players. I got players that need a pat on the ass. Sorry, excuse my language there. I got players that I need to scream at to get going. I got players that I need to coddle a little bit. You know what I mean? Like you need to figure out your group, what each player needs. It's not a one way doesn't work anymore. You know what I mean? Like one way doesn't work for an entire group. It's just, there's too many different individuals out there, and you need to be able to communicate and to get the most out of your group.
For sure. Same kind of question now for student athletes. So someone like you were a late bloomer and didn't really hit your stride till you're kind of later in your high school career. So someone like that, maybe someone that's kind of jumping in the varsity lineup for a sport, their freshman or their sophomore year. So what would you tell someone like that, these student athletes in high school? Once again, someone like you who is a high school athlete, Division I junior level hockey player, and an international player as well.
Yeah. Be coachable, be passionate. And I feel like the big word nowadays that I think drives coaches crazy is the entitlement. Like I feel like kids nowadays are a little bit entitled into what they expect, and I feel like it needs to be earned as well. You know what I mean? You have to earn that trust out of your coaching staff, and yeah, just be coachable. Like there's nothing worse. I'm sure you guys know it. You know what I mean? There's nothing worse than a kid that knows it all, that doesn't take criticism. And like, I'm not a big yeller or a screamer. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a firm believer when anything can get handled one-on-one. I'll never show up a player in front of fans, media. I don't throw guys under the bus, but sometimes you got to have hard conversations behind closed doors or in that room. You know what I mean? And it's a little bit about accountability and just be able to be being able to be accountable as a player.
Awesome. Aaron, I really appreciate your time. This conversation started here in Hastings, Minnesota, and took us all the way around the world there and landed in England here. So last thing, anything else you want to add to this? Trent, anything for you too? The microphone is yours, Aaron.
Oh yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was a good time. Trent, great seeing you again, buddy. Even though you're growing gray, no biggie.